Hello and thank you for joining us. President Trump will begin his weekend in Rome to attend the funeral of Pope Francis. The president and first lady arrived in Italy Friday and will be back in the United States Saturday night. Ahead of his 100th day in office next week, we're getting insights into the president's thinking from a new Time magazine interview. On the issue of trade, he says he has spoken with Chinese President Xi Jinping on the phone, but did not specify when. The U.S. currently imposes 145% tariffs on some Chinese goods. Later, when asked for more details about his conversation with Xi, he refused to give specifics.
You said that you've spoken to President Xi multiple times. Is that since taking office, sir?
I don't want to discuss that, but I'm speaking to a lot of people from China, but I'm speaking to people from all over the world on the tariffs, and we're making very good deals. Very good deals. It's going to make our country rich. We're not going to be ripped off like we have been for the last literally 50 years.
On Ukraine, President Trump said Russia would get to keep Crimea as part of a future peace deal. Russia annexed the Crimean Peninsula in 2014, which has long been opposed by the West. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has already said he will never recognize Russia's claim over Crimea. We're going to get to all of that in a moment, but we begin in Vatican City as thousands prepare to say a final goodbye to Pope Francis. His coffin at St. Peter's Basilica has been closed, capping off 3 days of public viewing. On Saturday, a state funeral will be held in his honor in St. Peter's Square, followed by a burial. Tony Aiello is in Vatican City with the latest.
Security guards closed the lines to St. Peter's Square Friday, marking the end of 3 days of public viewing for Pope Francis. The focus now shifts to the late pontiff's funeral and burial Saturday morning. Among those taking part in the service, American Kelsey Gussie.
This is such a huge honor to be a part of this momentous occasion.
The 28-year-old journalist for Vatican News was chosen to do the first reading at the funeral.
The preparations actually started this morning with a practice here in St. Peter's Square, and we learned how we were going to walk up to the ambo and how we were to read.
Gussie went to Mount St. Mary's University outside Baltimore. She met Pope Francis twice. She says the first time he blessed her rosary ring. The second time was on her birthday.
He actually wished me a happy birthday. And in those moments, I didn't see him as the head of the Catholic Church. I saw him as a grandfather. And so for me, I think I'll remember him as someone who really cared for each person that he met.
Gussie told me it's a little overwhelming to think she'll be sharing a platform with so many dignitaries from around the world, including Prince William and President Trump, who had nice things to say about the Pope as he left for Rome.
I thought he was a fantastic kind of a guy.
After the funeral mass, a procession will carry the coffin to the Basilica of St. Mary Major, where Francis will be buried. The Vatican says prisoners, transgender people, victims of sex trafficking, and unhoused people will be part of the final send-off outside the church to honor Francis's focus on the marginalized and the needy. Tony Aiello, CBS News, the Vatican.
We will have full coverage of the Pope's funeral Saturday morning, beginning with Norah O'Donnell's historic interview, Pope Francis I. It will stream at 2:45 a.m. Eastern Saturday. And a CBS News special report of Pope Francis's funeral will begin at 3:45 a.m. Eastern right here on CBS News 24/7 and Paramount+. Let's bring in CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cortez. Nancy, beyond attending the Pope's funeral, President Trump said he could meet with foreign leaders while in Rome. What are we expecting?
Well, the president told reporters on Air Force One a short time ago, Lindsay, that if those meetings do occur, they're going to be informal. They will take place on the sidelines. He didn't think it would be appropriate, he said, to actually set up formal meetings with some of these foreign dignitaries when he is traveling to Rome to attend the Pope's funeral. So while this is President Trump's first trip abroad of his second term, it is only about a 14-hour trip for him, and it will be filled primarily with remembrances for the former Pope. He may see those foreign leaders. There's obviously a lot to talk about, from Ukraine to tariffs, but we don't anticipate that there will be any serious closed-door sit-down meetings taking place, at least not from what we know right now.
And President Trump addressed the war in Ukraine in that Time magazine interview. What did he say about peace talks and the conflict itself?
Well, on one hand, he said that he felt that he was getting closer to reaching a deal with Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky. On the other hand, as you pointed out, he did say in that interview that Russia would be keeping the Crimean Peninsula, which it seized back in 2014. That was something that was surprising to many who are watching this process play out. Surprising to see the president concede that in the midst of negotiations. Typically, you would think that that would be something that he would hold on to try to wrestle other concessions out of the Russians. So that raised a lot of eyebrows, and obviously the Ukrainians have been saying that they will never recognize Russia's control over Crimea formally. So we'll have to see what that does to these very fragile negotiations.
China is denying that there are ongoing discussions with the U.S. on trade. What is the White House saying?
Well, China says there are no discussions. The White House says there are no discussions. The only person who insists there are discussions going on is President Trump. And he keeps saying it, even though his Treasury Secretary, his press secretary, and Chinese officials all insist it is not true. In that Time magazine article, he was asked if President Xi has called him to discuss these tariffs. He said yes. But then when reporters asked him about that, you played the clip, he was pretty cagey, didn't want to say when exactly they spoke. And that's because the Chinese say that actually that call has not been placed.
And Nancy Cortez, thank you. President Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff met Friday with Russian President Vladimir Putin amid ongoing efforts by the administration to broker a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia. Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio have said the U.S. could soon walk away from negotiations unless they see real progress. President Trump has also said he believes both sides want peace. Just hours before that meeting, a car bomb killed a senior Russian military officer in Moscow. Russia accused Ukraine of being behind the attack. Kyiv has not commented. CBS News Pentagon reporter Eleanor Watson joins us now. Eleanor, do we know if there were any breakthroughs in Witkoff's meeting with Putin?
Well, President Trump seems to think so because he posted today that success seems to be in the future, which is the step in the opposite direction of what we heard earlier this week when he again accused President Zelensky of Ukraine for prolonging the war. That criticism of Zelensky is just the latest in Trump's pressure to get Zelensky to come to a deal. But we also heard from President Trump a rare rebuke of Russian President Vladimir Putin when President Trump said on Truth Social, Vladimir, stop, after the deadliest strike on the capital of Ukraine in Kyiv happened just this week. So despite efforts to get to the negotiating table, the war goes on, including today with this killing of the Russian general, proving that peace is not as easily achievable as President Trump envisioned when he promised to end this war in the first 24 hours of his second term.
Let's turn to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. What are you learning about tensions behind the scenes between Hegseth and top officials?
So Secretary Hegseth has threatened the Joint Staff, the top military officers in the country, including the second highest ranking military officer of the entire United States military, with lie detector tests to try and stop leaks to news outlets. His paranoia of leaks to the press also led to the firing of 3 officials from his inner circle just last week. Another official, a 4th official, left the Pentagon amid the turmoil this week. Hegseth is facing continued scrutiny for his use of signal and his claim that sensitive details about the timing and weapons used in airstrikes ahead of those strikes is somehow not classified information. Hegseth, it was revealed this week, also used signal on his personal phone to give sensitive updates to his inner circle. Cybersecurity experts tell us that personal phones are of concern because personal phones are a frequent target of foreign adversaries, which kind of goes to this concern that Hegseth, at the very least, has been careless about some of the most sensitive details in the military because those details need to be protected in order to save lives.
We're also learning the Pentagon took steps so Secretary Hegseth could check messages on the Signal app while at the Defense Department. What do you know?
So sources are telling CBS that Secretary Hegseth had a system installed inside of his office so that he could respond to and see messages on Signal. That is of concern because that means that there is a internet connection going from his office, which is a secure area, to outside of his office to his phone, which is kept outside of secure areas. Cybersecurity people, experts would call that a dirty line because it's not secure. Defense Department is denying that there's any dirty line. Their explanation is that Hegseth does have a system in his office that mirrors his personal phone. So there is a physical line connected from a monitor in his office out to his phone so that he can see when messages appear and he can leave his office to go and check those messages.
Okay. Eleanor Watson, thank you.